Hello, and a very warm welcome to this 1.1 session. My name is Els. For those of you who join us for the first time, let me give you a little bit of a background. Several of us working for Onepoint Consulting are meditating on a regular basis. The meditation we practice is called Raja Yoga. It's the yoga of the mind. And we started this project way back in May 2020, which was in the middle of the pandemic, lockdown, COVID time, and it was a very stressful time for many people. Some people were on furlough schemes, other people had no idea whether they still would have a job after the pandemic. And so the idea came that why not to share some of these thoughts with a wider audience. And that was the start of the project. So what we have been doing so far is every fortnight on Fridays, 9 a.m. UK time, we invite an experienced meditator and we ask him or her to share their thoughts about a particular topic, but also to guide us into a short meditation. So far, we have had more than 100 guest speakers from all over the world. We have recorded the sessions and they are available on YouTube. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Benoît Duché, who joins us from France. Benoît is a scriptwriter, a film director, and a producer. He has been working in the marketing and advertising industry in Paris for many years, but he has also been the vice president and managing director of a French luxury fashion house in New York. Benoît himself has been meditating, practicing and teaching Raja Yoga meditation for many, many years. And the topic he has chosen for today is self-care, world care. So very, very warm welcome to you, Benoît.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, self-care, world care. In order to care for the world, I first have to care for myself. And one way to care for the self is to have, this kind of pure intention to do something for the world. But when I see the state of the world nowadays, I know that I cannot help physically or even financially everywhere because there are so many, people under the rubles right now in Turkey and people in conflicts all over and famines and everything. So, what we do is that we send good feelings and with pure intention and powerful vibrations. And that's what I've been doing for many years. But somehow, I don't know about you, but I need proof that it works. So let's start with the basic. The basic self-care is, of course, as we all know, proper food, proper hygiene, and regular exercise. I won't talk about it because it's not my specialty, and people have written and talked about that, better than I. But what I can say personally is that since I live in the south of France, I have adopted what I call vegetarian Mediterranean diet, which means basically that I've replaced seafood by seaweeds, if you want. And I ride my bicycle for about 30 kilometers a day. In the morning, I go to the beach, and in the afternoon, on the other side, I go to the mountain, which is nearby with the very protected forests. So, and this exercise, which I didn't need so much when I was young, now I really feel that it's good for my health. And of course, from, let's say, May to December, I go swimming every morning when there's nobody on the beach. It's wonderful. So we all know, how the body influences the mind. But nowadays, our traditional Western medicine has understood the influence of the mind on the body more and more. And that's why you see more and more like meditation rooms in hospitals nowadays. So physical health is linked to spiritual health. Sorry. But the point is that every day my mind is under influence. My mind is DUI, driving under influence. And, you know, it's outside influences from people or situations, but also inner influences due to all sorts of identifications, and we'll talk about them. So many identifications that we are not even aware of them. So the question is, where is my mind most of the time? I know where my head is, I know where my hands and my feet and my car and my house are, but where is my mind most of the time? And so at the beginning of the day, you know, what you do, especially if you have children or if you have guests, is that you kind of plan the meals that you are going to have during the day. And then you go and you buy the food and you buy, you know, ingredients which you know are good for you, and other ingredients which you know are not so good for you, like greasy things and cookies and all that kind of, and sweets and so on. And it's the same thing early in the morning. I plan the meals I'm going to give to my mind during the day. So am I going to let my mind stuff itself with sticky, stinky thoughts, like brooding over useless matters, dwelling on worries and anxiety, when I know it's not only bad for me, but it's also pointless? It clogs my mind. It blocks its creativity, just as fat blocks my arteries. But our mind is a fantastic tool, and it's much more powerful than most people might imagine. Within our minds, we have the ability to change our perception of reality. So how does this ability help the world? We all know Gandhi's famous quote, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." And we also know the famous law of attraction: what you put out, you get back. So if you're putting out positive energy, you're getting that back. And when I change my outlook, I change the wavelength I'm sending out to the world, and life, working as a mirror, sends me back something of the same nature. So today what I want to do is that I want to give you a few examples, a few experiments, scientific experiments, which demonstrate the incredible power of the mind for self-care and world care. First example I'm going to give, in 1986, Professor Péoche of the University of Nantes in the west of France did this very simple experiment. He took a chick just out of the egg, and he put in front of the chick a robot. So when the chick got out of the egg, the first thing he saw was the robot, and the chick thought that the robot was his mother. And when I say robot, it was nothing fancy. It was just, you know, a square tin on wheels with a battery. And the robot was also programmed by a computer to go at random back and forth and right and left and so on. So what Dr. Péoche did is that he put the robot in one square room. So the robot was going like that at random. And that room was separated from another room with just a transparent glass. And in the other room was the chick. And so the chick could see his mother going in every direction. And the chick wanted his mother so much that just through the power of its mind, it managed to get the robot, you know, getting glued to the window, getting so close to the window that it was against the window. Just the power of the mind of a chick. Can you imagine? So Dr. Péoche said that he tried something similar with human beings, but it doesn't work that well because precisely we have our doubts, and also because we don't know the power of our mind and we don't know how to use it. Second example I want to give, and I will put it back in a personal context. 1986 had been declared by the UN as the Year of Peace. And during that year, I took part in a great project, international project, which was called, some of you may remember it, the Million Minutes of Peace. million minutes of peace appeal, exactly. And so, you know, it consisted of asking people, I think it ran in 89 countries, asking people all over the world, whatever their race, religion, ethnicity, and so on, to give 1 minute of peace to themselves and to the world, at least 1 minute of peace. And so in France, for instance, we had a double-deck British bus going around France and stopping in every big city. And, you know, every time people would come and they would fill up a form where they would commit to give themselves and to give to the world 1 minute of peace, at least. And then, so that ran from May to September. And then on September 16, 1986, which is the Day of Peace, the UN Day of Peace, the team of the Million Minutes, the team of the project, went to New York and offered symbolically to the UN General Director in New York millions of minutes of peace that had been collected around the world. And so, you know, I was completely involved in that. It was really a full-time job from May to September 1986. But somehow I wanted to see proof, and I couldn't really see proof in the state, in the way the world was going. But recently, I learned that the year after that, in the war between Israel and Lebanon, a few American researchers created a project called International Project for Peace in the Middle East. And what they had, they gathered what they call a commando of thinkers, people who had been trained into optimistic meditation, and they were sent on the battlefield with the mission to feel happy while spreading a feeling of peace. So that means that in order to do so, these people, whom they called the pink helmets, had to stay in the mindset or in the consciousness that war was already over. So, and everywhere this squad of pink helmets went, the peace that they rejoiced about became a reality. That means terrorist actions stopped, offensives and countermeasures decreased, and ceasefires were respected. But as soon as they stopped the feeling of peace, war would start again. And the same test was repeated with the same result. These people's job was to observe a reality that was opposite to what was going on around them. In other words, these people had to remain in a spiritual reality, a spiritual consciousness that was opposite to the physical reality. And of course, they were not allowed to judge, you know, the fighters or to take side from, to the Lebanese or the Palestinians or whatever, and nor could they feel bad about the surrounding violence. They had to practice blindness as a source of light, which is interesting. And they had to maintain their enthusiasm no matter what. That means that lucidity for them, lucidity of the physical reality, would have been a form of surrender or a form of defeat. So then, you know, you might wonder, knowing that, and you know, this experiment being certified by scientists, why don't we send more pink helmets when there is war instead of sending tanks and weapons? But I leave you the answer of that because I'm sure you know it. From this experience, researchers in Princeton University defined the number of people needed to stop conflicts. And they defined that square root of 1% of the population needs to feel peace in order for peace to become reality in a concerned area, which means that for the whole world, we need less than, we need less than 10,000 volunteers to feel peace for peace in the world. Again, it's amazing. And in the same way, many experiences of this kind of reprogramming reality have been done by scientists over cancer tumors. But that's another story. But actually, I realized afterwards that's exactly how I stopped smoking about 40 years ago without knowing it. You know, after having tried so many times to stop smoking, I smoked about 1 pack a day for 20 years, let's say. And I tried many times to stop, but it never worked. So that means I would stop a few days and then I would start smoking again because I was in a society or something. And I was always in the consciousness of the smoker is trying to stop because, you know, of the power of will, which doesn't really work. But then one day I had a very deep meditation, a long and very deep meditation. And during that meditation, I switched consciousness, meaning suddenly I saw myself as a non-smoker and I saw my lungs being pure. And I stopped immediately without any effort, and I never smoked again. Just switching the consciousness made everything very easy. Something which was very difficult before that, and which was really not really successful, suddenly the success was immediate in a second and very easy and sustainable. You know, it remained like that. And most of the time we don't see the world as it really is, but as our brain has been programmed or has been conditioned to see it. Like, you know, there is this book which I always mention by Betty Edwards called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which she explains that when you're a child, you've been taught that drawing a tree or painting a tree is, you know, a lot of green and a brown trunk. And then when you try to draw again or paint again when you're an adult, so you plant your chisel in the middle of nowhere and you watch trees, but in fact you don't really see them because you continue to paint tree as being green with a brown trunk. But in fact, if you were to really, really look at the tree, you would realize that there is a lot of yellow, there's a lot of blue, all kinds of color and all kinds of nuances in that tree. But most of the time we don't see it. And if you look at artists like Picasso or before him, Braque and the Cubist, or even before them, Cézanne and so on, that's exactly what they try to do. They try to show a different reality at the same time. And in fact, you know, there is no conflict between the parallel physical reality and the spiritual reality. In fact, the more I choose spiritual reality as my consciousness, the more I will be able to observe physical reality in a different angle, the more I will be able to uncondition myself, if you will, and eventually physical reality will seem lighter and easier. So to stay in a spiritual reality doesn't mean that I am disconnected to physical reality. But there is a difference between being connected and being over-identified. So much identified to physical reality or physical consciousness that we become trapped into it. In my spiritual reality, when facing an obstacle, I change my spectacles and I see the spectacle, the spectacle in French. Another example, another experiment which I want to mention. 10 years ago, a psychology teacher of Stanford University became famous with a TED talk that she gave on stress. Her name is Kelly McGonigal. You may have heard of her. And she said, you know, so she mentioned this experiment, which was run on 30,000 American adults over 8 years. And the experiment started with asking those people 2 questions. First question, have you been exposed to no stress, little stress, or a lot of stress in the past year? Second question was, do you think stress is good for your health, or do you think it's bad for your health? And then, they followed the people for 8 years, and they saw who was dying or who had hard conditions, hard problems. And so you had 3 groups. You had the group of people who experienced no stress, people who experience a lot of stress, but who thought that stress is bad for your health, and people who experience, again, a lot of stress, but who thought that stress was good for your health because they had been explained why, and I will tell you. And what they noticed is that, well, of course, people who experienced a lot of stress in the previous year had a 43% increased risk of dying. But that was only true for the people who also believe that stress is harmful for your health. And people who experience a lot of stress, so the third group, but didn't believe stress to be harmful, were no more likely to die. In fact, these people of the third group had the lower risk of dying than anyone of the study, including the people of the first group who experienced little stress. So that means that changing how you feel about a condition like stress actually makes you healthier. And it also means that when you change your mind about something like stress, you can change your body's response to stress. Because she explains that, of course, when we are in a stressful situation, the heart pumps, a lot and sends a lot of blood and a lot of adrenaline in our arteries. But the difference is that the second group, the people who had a lot of stress, but who thought that stress is bad for you, their arteries are retracting, which of course is very bad because the heart is pumping a lot and there is no room for the blood to go through. Whereas the third group, the people who were exposed to a lot of stress, again, their heart was pumping a lot, but their arteries was becoming larger. So she explains that, the blood, the stress sense makes the heart sense a lot of adrenaline and also a lot of oxytocin, which, as we know, is the empathy hormone. And in fact, oxytocin protects the cardiovascular system from the effect of stress because it's a natural anti-inflammatory. And so it's actually strengthened our heart. And then the study showed also that people who spend time, people who have a lot of empathy and spend time caring for others, showed absolutely no stress-related increase in dying or in having heart problems, even after a stressful experience. That's how much our power of thoughts can do for our self-care and for the world care. Another example which I want to show. On August 3rd, 1904, Rosalie Villedier, 42 years old, was in the train going to Lourdes. Lourdes is one of those big pilgrimage places in the south of France where people usually get cured miraculously. So she was on that train, but she actually didn't want to go on that train. She was on that train because she was in the terminal phase of a very, very heavy disease, and the doctors had told her they couldn't do anything for her. But she didn't want, so her family had told her, you should go to Lourdes, but she didn't want to go to Lourdes. And well, she was convinced and she went to Lourdes and she was in that train. And in that train, there was also a young girl who was also going to Lourdes and who had exactly the same disease as her. And so Rosalie Villedier, from that point on, went to Lourdes with she was praying for the young girl. She went to Lourdes not for herself, but to pray for the young girl. And so two of them arrived in Lourdes, and Rosalie Villedier, took the water. That's what you do when you get in Lourdes. And she was in that water, and she got out of the water, she was cured. The young girl was not cured. She didn't make it. And so Rosalie Villedieu, in a way, felt bad about that. And the year later, she went back to Lourdes to thank the Virgin Mary, but also to pray for the soul of the young girl that she feels she had stolen her own healing from. And, you know, when she was there, she was blind. She had become blind. And again, she was put in the miraculous water of Lourdes. And when she got out, she recovered her sight. She was not blind anymore. And so there is a professor called Brendan O'Regan from the Science Institute in California, who researched the common factors of all these people who had been miraculously cured in Lourdes. And what he found as the common factors, the first one, in that all the people who have been cured are not begging. They are not in demand of anything for themselves. And I think that's very important. You know, they have a completely, we were talking about empathy, they have a completely empathetic attitude toward others in their consciousness. The other features of their state of mind, of these people, is open-mindedness, meaning they go there without any kind of expectation. Empathy, as we said, and also let go. They let go of their own personal suffering for the sake of someone else's health. And the other point that he noticed in all these people is that they have what he calls active humility. And active humility is what we have to, the kind of attitude we have to have when we want to be involved in world care, meaning that if, as I mentioned in a project in 1986, whether I see the result, a successful result, or whether I don't, I must not consider that as a personal success or as a failure or a defeat. All those notions of failure and defeat and guilt and all that kind of thing don't have their room, their place in a spiritual path, in my opinion. Meaning that, for instance, I mentioned beforehand that, you know, before I had this switch of consciousness, I tried to stop smoking. But even the moments when, you know, I stopped and then I smoked again and then I stopped, this was not a failure because there is always something left, meaning that, you know, it's an unconscious process which builds up, and it always gives a result at one point or another. So never consider that as being a failure. One last example which I want to give, a personal example. From the age of 17 until about 24, I went through a depressive phase, which in hindsight, I realized was partly nostalgia and partly spiritual aspiration. And what's even more confusing is that I had no reason at all to be depressed because everything was fine in my life. But the soul probably needed that to prepare the field for the spiritual life that I would adopt later on. So the problem is that, you know, even if you get out of depression, it leaves an imprint, an inner imprint, what we call a sanskar of depression, which then becomes a reflex or even a refuge every time you have to face an adverse situation. And so what I've come to realize is that every time this sanskar or this reflex of depression, of frustration, of being a victim would come up, it would ring a bell. And I would make sure to go back to my inner space and sit on my spiritual swing, which is exactly what we are going to do together. And you know, I try to stay there because that's exactly where I want to stay, where I feel good, and where I know I am more positive, more productive, more powerful. And I know it's a sustainable consciousness. In other words, the only thing I have to do for self-care and world care is to remain all the time in such an elevated and natural state of consciousness that I can spread it largely to the world. There's nothing difficult in that. The higher I am spiritually, the lighter and the more detached I am, the larger it spreads and enriches souls everywhere with a lot of power. And that's what I suggest we can do now, if you will. You just, relax. You relax the shoulder, you relax the neck and everything. You can keep your eyes open or you can close your eyes as you wish. And you just go into your inner space. Let's say we put our inner space here in the middle of the forehead. And you are in your inner space, in this space where you feel really good, this space which is yours, the space that nobody can invade, the space where you feel really very protected. And in this space, you feel very free and you feel very light. And in this inner space, this spiritual reality of mine, I have my spiritual swing. And I just sit on my swing. And that's all I do. I just swing. I don't have to do anything else. I don't have to think about anything else. In fact, if any thoughts come, I tell the thoughts, well, for the time being, I'm swinging and I will deal with you later on. So I'm just swinging and I feel free and I feel light and I feel very peaceful and I feel really good. And it's so easy to do. And at the same time, it's something which is very deep, because just by doing that, I change my reflexes, my spiritual reflexes. I change my spiritual habits and I can uncondition myself and I can really adopt more and more this habit of going into this unlimited consciousness, which is my spiritual reality. And while I'm swinging, I see the world down there. I see our beautiful planet. And I see all those people who are in physical conditions which are so difficult and so hard everywhere now in the world. And what I can do, as I said, I cannot be everywhere at the same time where need would be. So I'm on my swing, and from my swing, I'm sending a lot of this lightness and this light and this easiness to the world, to those people. And I hope, and I know now, because I have seen the scientific proofs, I know that just sending them a lot of this lightness, even if they are under the rubbles of an earthquake, for a few seconds, it will make the soul a little bit lighter. It will make them better a little bit, and it will despite their physical condition, they will be able to fly over that situation. They will be relieved from that situation for a few seconds. The soul will be relieved. The soul will be able to see this spiritual reality and to feel good and to stay in that consciousness which brings a lot of comfort to the soul and a lot of freedom. And just help them to get rid of their anxiety just for a few seconds. That's what I can do. That's what I can do. And it's the best world care, and it's also the best self-care for them and for me. So I encourage you to do that every day, just as in 1986 we asked people to give a minute of peace to the world. Well, you can just do that. And I tell you, it works. It's really efficient, and it really has a lot of power. Just go into your inner space, whether you're in the subway or driving or in a meeting or whatever, go into your inner space, sit on your spiritual swing, and send light to the world. Do that and see for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Benoît. This was really very interesting. I've written down a few things for myself, and what I really like is how you explained that the more I choose spiritual awareness as my reality, the more the physical reality will become lighter and easier. So thank you so much. So we will have this session recorded on YouTube, but then also the next one, the session is going to be on the 17th of March, and we will have Radha Gupta from Italy joining us for that session. The topic for the 17th of March is how to be kind to yourself in a very demanding world. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks to the technical team, and bye to everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Benoît.